Hi, I'm Macy.
And I'm Missy.
We're best friends
and business partners. And each week, we're going to bring you a quote that inspires us, and we're going to talk about it.
Join us as we break down our favorite impactful messages for leadership and share how you can apply them to lead with confidence and purpose.
Get ready for a fun and authentic journey into leadership, life, and everything in between. Well, hey, bestie.
Hey, bestie. Guess what day it is? It's podcast day, our favorite day of the week.
Yes, ma'am. And today we've got a special guest who is someone who falls into another one of my favorites categories. He is one of my favorite people. And Macy, I know you've never met him, but that I've shared a lot about him. And so I'm really excited to get to spend some time with him today, even if it's virtually.
Yeah.
So I say, let's get started.
So are you going to start breaking out in song and start singing that Black Eyed Peas song?
Let's get it started. Yes, we are. And you know me so well. But I won't, because our guest today is dignified.
Yes.
He's also a dear friend, Dr. Joseph S. Paul. It feels really weird saying it so formally because everybody who knows him is used to just saying Joe Paul, right? So Joe Paul, welcome.
Joe Paul.
We are so glad you're here. And Joe Paul, everybody calls you Joe Paul, yes?
That is true. Even my own mother.
Even your
own
mother.
Well, if it's good enough for Mama, Joe Paul, it's good enough for us.
That's right. Joe Paul, because we love our podcast to feel more like a conversation amongst friends rather than doing some type of formal invitation and like reading your bio, we would love it if you would just let our listeners know about you and your leadership journey and maybe even a little bit about how we're connected. So tell us a little bit about you.
So I'm currently the president of the University of Southern Mississippi with
Golden Eagles.
Hattiesburg and on the Gulf Coast. Southern Miss is a Carnegie Research One university of the highest status, a great place. And most importantly, we have really great alums. And one of them is Missy.
That's right.
It had to be the very late 1990s when she was an undergraduate student. Is that close?
1986 is when I started.
I'm trying to help you there.
Yeah, well, you know what? You can't deny your age.
We know for sure that it was the 1900s.
Yeah,
that's what the teens say now. Like they call 1986. It was the 1900s.
It's really
a whole
funny.
thing.
It's funny.
A whole thing.
But yes, and actually, you were my boss, Joe Paul.
That's right.
I worked for you in your office when you were Dean of Student Affairs?
Yeah, Dean of Student Development. That's right. So I've really been blessed to send to have my whole career here at Southern Miss. And for the largest part of it, about 40 years, I worked in direct service to students. So in the 1980s, I was Dean of Students. In 1994, I became Vice President for Student Affairs. I worked for 5 different university presidents, so I hope I learned something. And then I took an early retirement about 9 years ago. And then 7 years after that, or almost 3 years ago now, I was called back to be the 11th president of Southern Miss. So we're here in rock and roll at a place that I love. And Mayce, you need to know that Missy was as much a glow of positivity and energy and sunshine as an undergraduate as she is today.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me one bit. Of course she was. That's why we love her.
It kind of tears me up that you just said that. We had some good times back then. I mean, I know everyone probably looks back to their university years with fond memories, but man, there is something special about the University of Southern Mississippi. And I want to share, I haven't even shared this story with Macy. Joe Paul.
Whoa.
Wait,
before we get too deep, can we just share the quote?
Yes, but this was going to be a lead into the quote, but go ahead and share the quote.
All right, let me share the quote or else we're going to forget to share the quote.
And
then we're not going to share the quote.
Here we go.
Okay, so here's the quote for today. Please think about your legacy because you are writing it every day. And that was penned by Gary V. I don't know what his real last name is. Everyone calls him Gary V. I don't want to mess up his last name.
Vaynerchuk or something like that,
Yeah.
I
Well,
think.
we're just going to call him Gary V. So everybody knows who he is. I'm going to say it one more time. Please think about your legacy because you are writing it every day.
It's such a good one.
It is.
And
I'm excited. I'm
yeah,
excited
it's
to dig in.
perfect for this one with you, Joe Paul, because I know you've been writing your legacy every day for decades. And this will be a great segue into my story. A few weeks ago, we lost a very special golden eagle who was my sorority sister, Dana Ferris, and Dana Vovidich Ferris. And I went back to Hattiesburg. Joe Paul went to the funeral. Really thought I would see you there. Either I missed you or I know you had something that you couldn't get away because I know you would have been there. But you were a topic of conversation, ironically, and it made me think, because Macy and I planned things out, right? We had to get on your schedule to get you on a podcast, and I thought, oh my goodness, the quote about legacy is so perfect because everybody was talking about how you knew everyone's name. You knew everyone's name. And you, it didn't matter where you saw them, the context, you knew those students' names. And we've never talked about it, but when you think about your legacy, and there's another quote that says, a person's name is the sweetest sound to their ears.
Yeah.
And maybe you knew that, maybe you didn't, but you made every person on that campus feel special.
How many students on average are on that campus?
Oh, depending on the year, there might be 15,000, 16,000. There's a lot.
Wow. That says something.
Did you even realize that, Joe Paul? Is that something you did intentionally, using people's names? And do you realize that's part of your legacy?
I certainly heard it a lot.
Mhm.
And, a common thing that I hear is, I just can't remember names. I can't remember them. I don't want to get off on them. We could do a workshop on them. But not only is it important for you to hear your name, but the best way for me to remember your name is to use your name when I'm talking to you.
Yes.
So it's just, it's just kind of been second nature to me.
Yeah. I love that.
Let me say one thing, Macy, and we'll really get started. But I have to say, Joe Paul, I've got a niece that is coming to USM in the fall.
Yeah.
My sister's little girl, she's a young woman now, Savannah Westacott. And it's so funny because I was talking about you and over Easter a few weeks ago. And she was like, he doesn't even know who I am. And I was like, first of all, you're going with a scholarship with his name. And second of all, he does know you and he will know you if he doesn't. So she's so excited to come and be a Southern Miss Golden Eagle. And then that next year, we're hoping her little sister will be there too.
That's
all right. That's so good. So Joe Paul, when you think about today's quote, please think about your legacy because you're writing it every day. What does that quote mean to you?
It's pretty clear. It means that a legacy is viewed looking back, but it only can be built in the present, day by day. So the message is, be mindful, be intentional, be purposeful every day. And in my case, the goal is be really purposeful in every relationship. It's that simple to me.
Wow.
We always say things come down to connection, to relationships. So a follow-up on that, Joe Paul, I shared a little bit of the students' perspective of what your legacy means to us, the people who have been fortunate enough to be under your leadership in some way. But when you think about your career at Southern Miss, what do you personally think about the legacy that you're building there? And is it different now that you are the head honcho, that you are the president?
I suppose a bit, but my view throughout life is I'm not really worried about what people think of me when I'm gone in terms of what I've done, what buildings I've built, or I sincerely want to leave the university better than I found it. We'll talk more about that. But far more important to me would be if my grandsons one day encounter somebody that knew me and they say, he was a good man. He helped,
Mm,
he helped a lot of people. That would mean
yeah.
more to me than he was a great university president or Southern Miss is what it is today because of Joe Paul. That's far more important. So I think it's important to be purposeful and intentional and have a really clear vision of why you're leading, who you're leading, how you want to treat people. But for me, it's not about constructing a legacy about me. My time is here, it will go. There'll be other great leaders, hopefully, that pick up where we left off. And, that's the other thing to, I think, remind people is you don't get to define it. You live it,
That's right.
but other people will define it. And that's really beyond your control.
That's
Yeah.
good.
I think that's important for people to understand that you're not going to get to say what
Yeah.
your legacy, you really don't have much say in it. You could do all the things, you could be intentional, you could be purposeful, but you don't have a say on how other people see you. So, when it comes to leadership at the university, Joe Paul, obviously you balance a lot of things, right? There's the students, there's the faculty, there's the community, there's the athletics. So, with that, when you are, let's say, busy, how do you keep the bigger picture of what you need to do? How do you keep that front and center when there's so many things that you need to do?
It's a great question because reality is it's very, very hard. There are so many things that come up, political issues, financial issues. An alum's upset because somebody didn't make the Dixie Darlings dance team.
Sure.
And all those are part of the job. So it's not as though you should ignore or deny them, but you got to be incredibly, two ways for me as president. One is you got to be incredibly intentional every day. And at my best, as I'm easing into the evening, I'm home from work, whenever time that is, I'm looking at the next day, the next couple of days and saying, what's on that schedule that's going to move for me in the direction I want to go? And if it's not there, what can I find to be there? And the other part is to be intentional about looking back after whatever period of time you choose, daily, a week, and say, what did we do to move the needle back? The other thing that makes it a little bit easier as president of Southern Miss is I've got an incredible team of vice presidents who really run the operations. This should not be an operational job. This should be a job where you set the vision, where you sort of talk things into reality, where you tend to the culture, where you support your team, where you do a lot of outreach, those sorts of things. So great question. I wish I could say I'm really good at that. But there are days when I get so caught up in, what's on fire that
Yeah. Well, that's the reality. But I love two things that I love that I heard was the reflection piece, right?
Yes.
Reflecting the day, like reflecting to look ahead, but also reflecting back on what happened. But the other piece, of course, is that building of leaders, the multiplication of leaders, making sure that you've got bench strength, making sure that you have the right people on the team so that you could do the things that you need to do. And you've empowered
Yes.
a whole bunch of other people to do the things that they need to do. So there was a lot to unpack just in those few sentences.
And something I
that
heard,
you shared.
Macy, and Joe Paul, that you said is it when you were talking about your other leaders was the power of the team, right?
Yes.
Your legacy, the mark that you make from your time there isn't just dependent on you. It's who you surround yourself with and how you inspire them to do the things that need to be done. So there was gold in that. If
Yeah,
you're
for
taking
sure.
notes, listeners, go back and
back.
write some of that down. Intentionality, reflection. He didn't say the word
Empowerment.
empowerment, but he certainly meant it. So, Joe Paul, let me ask you this. You've been there for decades. You've seen Southern Miss go through some big transformations. Do you have a leadership moment or moments that you would say shaped you along the way into being that kind of leader that you are today?
Yeah. When you've got 43 years of those, it's hard to
Choose just one.
any one moment. And the reality of it is, in terms of developing as a leader, there's really not a mountaintop or seminal moment for me. Early on in my career, I probably would have pointed to times when you get a big promotion or you win an award or those sorts of things. But now it's about, I sort of feel like I've developed self-awareness to the extent that I've kind of got like an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring around, when the day ends, I kind of know
Yeah.
we did something good today. We
Mm.
helped somebody today. Even if it was difficult, we stood up, stood for what we believe.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, those days when I literally feel internally, just dragged down, I'll know that, yeah, that day wasn't spent, it really made a difference.
Well, it seems like you use your intuition to lead, which is important, right? It is a skill that some leaders, I really feel very intuitive to things. That's how I lead, from my gut. Either you have it or you don't have it, but it is a skill that can be honed. I think Missy's doing a great job, like trying to figure out, to lead from gut. But it sounds like, Joe Paul, that
I
you've
want
got
to
that.
leave from emotion oftentimes, right?
Yeah.
So I've
Most
got
of the
to
time.
shift that a little bit. That's part of my leadership growth that I'm working on, is listening to that gut rather than the emotions behind that intuition.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Joe Paul. How much time, and it may not be something you necessarily are intentional about based on what you shared about your grandsons, but how much time do you think about your legacy? Like, is it something? I mean, I know our mentor, John Maxwell, had a mentor years ago that said you should start thinking about your legacy now.
Right.
Right. Whenever that was for him.
Wherever
Let's
you
just
are
say
in your
wherever you
life.
are
Yeah.
now. So for you, how much time do you think about it? And then kind of a piggyback, like, when did you start to focus on your legacy?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that early in my career, the first quarter, maybe the first half, I didn't think about it at all.
Yeah.
I thought about going where I was planted. I was ambitious, I was doing good work and feeling good about it. And even today, for me now, it just feels a little self-centered and egotistical to think about my legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
But again, I've got a lot of things that I want to leave this university with.
sure.
And to me, my relationships, my personal integrity, I mean, those are the things that are most valuable to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, one way to think about legacy is, what do other people think about you? And, the best way to impact that positively is to treat people well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
love
it's
that.
so
True.
much
It's so
easier
true.
than the opposite, but some people have such trouble with that,
Yeah.
So do you
So,
think, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to ask, do you think for like young professionals that are in that early season of their leadership career, maybe they're just starting out on their leadership journey, do you think that would be the advice that you would give them about building a legacy, is just be helpful, just be kind, like be that true person of character? Or is there something else that you would advise them about building their legacy now? Like, it doesn't matter where you are in life, but so kind of
I think that's a
talk
great
about that.
question, Macy, because I think so many people think I'll think about my legacy later, and all
Yeah.
we have is now. But imagine what it could look like if you just started remembering that the legacy you're building is in all of those small moments, the way you treat people, the things you choose to
right.
do, and live a
Right.
life with
Yeah.
integrity.
Hey, bestie, can I be real about something? Leadership can feel lonely, doesn't it?
It can, especially when you're the one that everyone else is looking to for answers, but you've got questions of your own.
But we have a solution. We created Impactful Messages, a community for those who are built to lead.
It's a private space where real leaders can connect, grow, and get practical insight to lead with purpose.
That's right. There's no fluff, just real talk, real tools, and real people who, well, they get it.
That's right. And so if you're looking for leadership people, then this is your group. Come join us at www.inspiredpeopleinspirepeople.com.
Yeah. I would tell, it's not that I do tell young professionals all the time, that the most important thing is to grow where you are planted. We create graduates with audacious goals and dreams, and that's
Sure.
for us. But you can get ahead of yourself, right? Early in the game, right? And so it's about growing where you're playing, doing the very best job where you can right now. Don't get ahead of yourself. To the extent you can, check your ego. And because I really believe the only way we lead is in relationships with other people, is tend to your relationships, as though
Yeah.
your livelihood depends on it. 'Cause
Yes.
what?
So good.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And so when I think about just stumbling through life here in the 80s and the 90s, one of the things that's affirming to me is how many former students, Missy, I'll run into somewhere and I say,
Uh-huh.
you probably don't remember this, but you really helped me.
Yeah.
And I usually don't remember it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because it was just who you are. You
Yeah.
just were doing what you do. You
Well,
were
I was
nurturing
I
relationships.
was
You
put
were
in a
helping
place-
people.
yeah. And I was put in a place where I was able to do that.
Yeah, that is so good. Macy and I, we do an exercise in our training where we often have some younger folks and older folks as well, but we really encourage the younger folks through this really kind of out of the box activity to have them begin thinking about the mark they're leaving now. And a lot of it does go back to the connection, the integrity,
The
and what you're
character,
doing day by day by day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe we need to talk more with young graduates, young professionals it's consistency. It's showing
Mm,
every day.
yes.
Yeah.
It's easy to treat people well when things are going.
Sure.
It's not as easy when we're in disagreement.
Yeah.
When we're giving constructive feedback, but it's that consistency in word and deed every single day that really builds, your influence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
how
let me
you
ask you this, Joe Paul, because talking about consistency, obviously in any business person's role, there's a lot of things to get caught up that we think is urgent, right? The meetings, the emails, the pressure, the this, the that. And I know you talked
Yes.
earlier about having a strong team, but what do you do personally? What does Joe Paul do to keep focused on building yourself, building something lasting instead of just reacting to that email or to that meeting or to what that person says? How do you determine the urgent versus the important, I
Yeah,
guess?
it's that conundrum that we all face.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's almost at least two questions rolled into one there.
Yeah.
The important thing to do for me, and it's very difficult in a job like the president of a university. For some reason, people give that some, like it's some regal throne.
Well, it is.
And so if you're not real
It's an
careful,
honor.
it will be like the parable of the emperor who wore no clothes, right? That it's very
Say that again, Joe Paul. You kind of faded out. The
I'm sorry.
parable of what?
of the emperor who wore no clothes.
Oh, yeah.
In other
Okay.
words, nobody would tell me he was walking around naked. So the point of it is, it's very difficult for me to get true constructive feedback.
Mm,
Self-awareness will take you a long way, but it won't take you all the way. And so it's really critical. In my top team, for example, the most important place is that we develop such a level of trust that they are not afraid to tell me the unvarnished truth, in terms of what they see me doing well, but way more important, what I need to do differently. So when we debrief on a difficult meeting or a public speech, and so I've got to be really intentional about that. The best truth teller to me of what I'm doing is my wife. She didn't have any trouble saying, you could have done that a little different. That was fine. So you can't just do it through self-awareness alone. I think the more mature you get, and being old doesn't mean you're wise. There's some people that have 40 years of experience.
That's true.
Some people that have 1 year of experience repeated 40 times.
mm.
But you gotta have mentors. You gotta have people that you can go to and say, how am I doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you
Trust
got
comes up a lot in leadership, doesn't it? Like, I love what you just said about you've got the trust that you have with your team. They're not just yes people. They're not just going to say, yes, Joe Paul. Yes, Joe Paul. They're going to say, Joe Paul, no. right? This isn't working, or this isn't
Right.
how it should be, or can you see it a different way? So trust comes up so much in leadership. It is such an important facet about being a great leader.
It is. And another facet is humility, which Joe Paul is dripping in
Obviously.
humility.
Yes,
But I'm going to
obviously.
ask you a question that is going to require you to maybe feel like you're not being as humble
Humble.
as you usually are. But I want to know, when you think about your legacy at Southern Miss, and the legacy that you're writing right now, is there something that you're like, I'm most proud of this in the moment? And it not necessarily what you've done, but what the team's done, etc. Is there something you're really proud of, like in the moment?
There's a lot that I'm proud of in terms of things that we've been able to do together through the years. This is a university that evolved from first a teacher's college and then a good regional school to uh, when Aubrey Lucas got here and moving into the 80s and beyond became more than that, became um, uh, eventually a Carnegie Research One institution, but still at the same time, maintaining some of the characteristics of caring about each individual student, having small class sizes. And so, you know, in terms of what would make me happiest is to know that, backstory here, Macy, for years, including when Missy was coming through at orientation on freshman coming, I would challenge each and every one of them to begin with the end in mind, which means earn your degree, and to be committed to leaving Southern Miss better than you found it. That it's not transactional, that students need to put a hand on the wheel, and that by their leadership, by their citizenship, by their friendship to other people, Southern Miss can be better because they leave. And so I sure want it to be better because I was here. And so I don't know that so much that we're building the culture as lifting the culture up, but I want to tell you that culture trumps everything in my life.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we tell organizations that we train all the time, the culture is so important. And as the leader, quite frankly, it's your responsibility to set that culture,
That's
right?
right.
It all comes down, the buck stops with you. Let me ask you this, Joe Paul, because we're talking about writing your legacy every day. Just thinking about your career, has there ever been something like that in the moment seemed kind of small as it relates to your leadership, but that later it ended up being so important, or it ended up shaping your impact and how you would define your leadership or how you would define your legacy?
Well, Macy, it's almost always this moment, you know, right? You know,
Right.
how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? How do you
Right.
castle one brick at a time? So I again go back to those relationships. But I can give you another example that that happened at Southern Miss around the mid 80s. Southern the state of Mississippi is very diverse racially and in a lot of other ways. And at the um, institutions of higher learning in our state, other than the historically Black schools, Black students from Mississippi were underrepresented. And Aubrey Lucas was the president. We had a conversation with me about that and said, what can we do to be more inviting and more attractive to students of color from Mississippi? And at the time, everybody was doing minority student officers. And I said, no, that's not the way to do it, because what will happen is that we all need to serve all students. And if we put a shingle that says minority student services over here, then students of color will be pushed there. I said, let me hire an associate dean of students with multiple duties, including developing strategies for engaging minority students from Mississippi. You hired Vrida Delane. You remember that name, Missy?
I do.
Worked for me. It was awesome. And then we developed a strategy. You know, and the strategy was about it, it wasn't about any kind of affirmative action or that sort of stuff. It was about, when students get here, how can we engage them in meaningful ways in student life? And so we started to build organizations that kind of became incubators and then sent those students into other positions. So today, and that was what, gosh, 30 something years ago.
Yeah.
we have a minority student population that's the most reflective of the state of Mississippi, with about 30% sort of non-white students here. And it's a beautiful, diverse community, and everybody tugs on the same side of the rope. And
Right.
great.
Well,
So good.
I'm going to say
So that was a little thing.
that seems like a big thing to me, but I do have a small story, and I actually didn't plan to share this, but as you were talking, and Macy, you asked that great question, I'll have a small story to share. I may get a little teary, but it's nothing new that either of you don't know about me, is that I tear up easily. But there was a little girl in 1986 that was a freshman Kappa Delta at USM, whose dad suddenly died in February. And that spring, the head of student life came and loved on her and hugged on her and let her know that she was seen and heard, and actually offered her a job to work in his office. And she did. She worked in that office, and she saved every penny that she had. And that next Christmas, because of that, she was able to buy her mom, a young recent widow, a strand of pearls.
I remember you sharing that story with me.
Because of her, the head of student life saw her, knew her, made her feel special, provided a job, and then she got to pass that on. And so that little girl was me, or that young woman was me, Joe. And I thank you for that seemingly small, ordinary moment, making a big impact in my life.
Miss Lottie, I hope y'all talk about her
Today, yes. Today, this morning, I was telling her that we were recording this podcast, and she said to tell you hi. So,
it's stories like that, I think, that are such a great reminder that leadership isn't like the big moments, the big stages, the big speeches, the big hurrahs. Like it does come down to what Joe Paul's been saying the entire time, kind of weaving in the relationships. I mean, that one relationship, that one opportunity that Missy had because of that job created that ripple effect. And I think as leaders, we have to remind ourselves that it's not the big things. It's always, Joe Paul, I think you said that, isn't it always? It's always the little things. And if we could focus on the little things, then we have a chance to make really big changes and big differences.
Absolutely.
In people's lives.
So as we start to wrap up today on our time together today, Joe Paul, talk about how your thoughts of legacy have changed from when you first started your leadership journey to what it is today.
Well, as I said, I'm being really candid. I didn't think about legacy.
I thought that's what you were going to say.
For a very long time. And to me, and look, everybody's different, right? It's not about having a, 12-story building named after you. I always kid it around because I'm the shortest guy on campus. That little security shack in the front, I'll be named after me. But it really is that that we created a culture here.
Yeah.
Better than you found a culture, the culture of grit, which means that our students set audacious goals and pursue them with uncommon passion and relentless persistence. And that catches hold in people, not everyone, right? But then, like you, Missy, they go out in the world and they do great things. So, I mean, just think about, how lucky am I to have a job where, there are ripples out there. And because of your experience, you're different. And now your children and their children will be different.
And let me tell you this, Joe Paul, I went to a large university. I don't know who the president was. I don't know who the dean was. I don't know who the chancellor was. And for certain, they don't know who I was. So I know that you don't think that you're special and you're different. I think that you probably wake up every day because this is just who you are. But I am here to tell you that you are special and you are different because I didn't have that experience. And when you said 15,000 people, granted, the university I went to was much larger than that, but 15,000 people is not 1,500. It's not 500. It's still 15,000 people. So I have a question that we love to ask people like you is, what is a leadership lesson that you didn't learn in a course, right? Obviously, you're president, so you've gone through a lot of schooling to get to where you are.
Yeah.
But what's a leadership lesson that you didn't learn in a course or a classroom or a training,
Yeah.
that you only learned through experience?
Those are the tough ones sometimes.
Not tough for me.
Okay, let's hear it.
Absolutely the most impactful thing I've ever learned. And that is that trust is the cornerstone of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
That you don't lead buildings, you don't lead money, you lead humans. And people don't follow folks they don't trust.
That's right.
And trust is not given by position. Trust is earned every day in relationship.
So good.
So the most important thing I've learned is it's not what you say, it's not what you do. It's the relationship between the two. That if I make a commitment or an agreement with you, or I tell you I will try to do something, or I will do something, that I always follow through with great consistency.
So good.
It's about transparency. It's about owning when you drop the ball. Nobody's perfect, but
that's right.
Really, really intentional about building trust, one relationship at a time.
So good. And it's a great segue into our takeaway for the week. And so, listeners, if you only take one thing from today's conversation, let it be this: legacy isn't something that you create at the end of your life's journey. It's built in every conversation, every decision, every relationship, and it's built every single day. And it doesn't matter if you're leading a university, a team, a classroom, a family, or if you're just leading yourself. Right now, you're writing the story of your legacy.
Yeah. And I would also say, it's not about waiting for that big moment or the big title or the big opportunity. It really is how you show up when no one's watching. It's about the small choices you make when those choices are not easy. It's about speaking life into someone when maybe they're having a bad day or doubting themselves. It's about standing firm in who you are, what your values are. It's about trust. And that's where real legacy lives every day.
All right. So, Joe Paul, if our listeners want to stay connected with you or learn even more about what's happening at Southern Miss, where can they find you? Like LinkedIn, Insta, is there a Southern Miss page, etc.?
All of that. So,
all of the above. We're going to put it in our show notes as well.
Yes.
Instagram and Facebook and our website.
Yeah. Well, good. All right. Joe Paul, as we wrap up, we always ask our guests this final question. What is your favorite leadership quote? Yeah, sure. You can say two. You're Joe Paul. You're a double name. You can give us double quotes.
Here's the first.
Okay.
The two greatest wastes of human energy.
Okay, wait. Start over. You kind of faded out. Let's hear. Okay. I don't want to miss this quote now.
Okay. The two greatest wastes of human energy are blaming and justifying.
Oh.
Because neither get you anywhere.
Yeah.
They're excuses. They allow you to rationalize not meeting the mark. They do nothing to help anybody.
Yes.
So stop justifying.
Yeah. Macy and I always say you can have results or excuses, but you can't have both.
That's exactly right.
Okay. All right. What's number two?
Okay. Here's the final one. What you are not changing, you are choosing.
Oh, yes. Amen to that one.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. Well, listeners, we want to hear from you too. Do you have a favorite leadership quote? Send it our way and we might spotlight you on a future episode. But that's Joe Paul, we'd love to have you back one day. So
yeah, we could. There's a lot more we could talk about, Joe Paul. Yeah. And we will be back next week with another quote and more leadership insights. And you know what we're going to do?
We're going to talk about
it. Joe Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been so great.
Bye, y'all. Bye, bestie.
Bye, bestie.
Southern Miss to the top.
Southern Miss to the top.
Bye.
We want to thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, please show us some love by clicking the 3 dots to download the podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating on your podcast app and talk about it with other leaders to help them find the show from any of the major podcast apps. We'd love for you to follow us on social media too. Mpactful with an M, _messages on Instagram and Mpactful Messages on LinkedIn.